Here's a poem for you that I wrote some years ago. It's called The Barber. The barber is someone who creates by taking away, like a writer who owns only an eraser. He is like a construction company that begins with a large office building and ends up with a small wooden house. On the wall is his license, showing that he's been to school and learned of all the varieties of loss. For this reason, a haircut can make me nervous. Sometimes I close my eyes and hear only the snip of the scissors, their two gleaming halves talking of the balance that is here, the partnership between this man in a blue smock and the hairs faithful as rain, that even before birth and after death flow tirelessly out of the head towards the comb and the blade. Hello, and welcome to the Crane Bag Podcast. I am Jay Leeming. Where does poetry start? Where do you get it? Where is it from? How does it come into this world? Today we are going to explore some of these questions. We're going to explore them using a poem by a fella named Jay Leeming. Yes, one of my poems. It's called The Barber. Thank you for joining me. Let us begin. Where does poetry begin? Where does it start? This poem began for me when I was staying in a cabin in northern Minnesota, a cabin owned by the poet Robert Bly. These are the life answers. These are the facts of the matter, right? And poetry comes from that. It also comes from a place beyond. Who can say where poetry starts? Who can trace it? If we could trace it, if we could find it, if we could label it, well, then we could make poetry machines and we would just have good poetry all the time. But it doesn't work that way. Poetry is fundamentally mysterious. Inspiration is mysterious. These creative impulses we get, they come from the unknown. Way back, they would have said the muses, and that's as good an answer as any. Poetry comes from the mystery and it returns to the mystery. It comes from the unknown and it returns to the unknown. W.S. Merwin said that at one point. Meaning we don't know the fate of these things we make. We don't know where they're going to go, how long they'll last, when they will be given to the fire. We also don't know exactly where they come from. But that can be an exasperating answer. So I'm going to give you some other answers in addition to that. This poetry for me, this poem for me, is strongly influenced by Pablo Neruda, the Chilean poet, who had such a talent, such an ability to think in metaphors, to transform one thing into another. Just fantastic. His poetry's filled with that. It's a magical and transformative act. It's a action which poetry is better suited to accomplish than many other arts. Music, sculpture, painting. I mean, it's all great, right? It's all great. They all have their own particular strengths. But one of the strengths of poetry is to turn one thing into another. My love is like a rose, all right? That's a thing. You can just say that. My love is like a waffle iron. You could say that. My love is like a rock star on a stage. My love is like a quiet fly buzzing in the corner of a library, hoping to go outside. So we can just say those things. They don't have to be literally, factually true, but they have meaning. They can have meaning. So Pablo Neruda is a genius at that. His poems are just filled with that. In particular, his poem Ode to My Socks was really crucial for me and taught me how to see something more deeply by transforming it into other things. If you read that poem or listen to my podcast about it, I talk about and we explore how the socks he's writing about become other things. They become fish, they become cannons, they become all these wild things. It's a little bit like Proteus in the Odyssey, when Menelaus is stuck in northern Africa by a wind which keeps blowing and blowing and will not let him leave. He wonders what god he has offended. And he's walking along the shore, and a young woman says, who happens to be magical, says, well, you got to talk to Proteus, the old man of the sea, and he will tell you what you've done wrong, who you have offended, and what has caused this wind to come blowing, bearing down upon you. So with her help, he captures Proteus, but Proteus can change into many shapes. And so he transforms into a fire, into a snake, into a tiger, into a roaring stream, a river, all these wild things. And then finally, he becomes himself. So Proteus is known by his changes. Who is he really? Is he an old man of the sea, or is he also a fire and a river and a lion and a great tree? So in the same way, when we transform something into something else, it's a way of seeing it. It's a mode of perception. It's a way of perceiving it more deeply. You know, Halloween, right? Or whenever you put a costume on, it's a joke. It's a game. But perhaps it is a way of displaying some inner part of yourself. When you dress up as a zombie or as a witch or a ghost or as Superman, perhaps that is actually a display of some part of yourself. Perhaps there is a truth to that costume, to that game. And so with poetry, we can say, my love is like a waffle iron. We can say my... whatever, my time in the army was blah, blah, blah. We turn one thing into something else. And the rational mind says, that's ridiculous, Your love is not a rose is a flower, and your love is an emotion you feel. They're two different things. That's what the rational mind says. But the emotions within us, the dreaming part of ourselves, the unconscious, all the rest of us, which is a huge thing, which is probably more than half of what we are, right? It hears that, and it's like, oh yeah, my love is a rose, of course. And there's a truth to that. So Pablo Neruda was, again, like I say, a genius at finding that truth, at writing metaphors and similes, which were not just interesting and different and a wild ride, but were also true, and also said something about what he was talking about. And just to make it clear, metaphor and simile. A simile uses like or as. A metaphor uses is. So a metaphor goes a little further. A metaphor troubles the rational mind a little bit more. My cat is like an alligator because he sleeps in the sun and every now and then he snaps at me in a bad mood. Okay, we can get that. But my cat is an alligator. Well, then we're having a little trouble with that. We're like, whoa, what does that mean? What does that mean? Your cat is an alligator. So anyway, let's leave the cat there for a moment. And so in this poem, I was somehow driven to compare getting my hair cut and compare the barber, him or herself, in this case himself, to other things. The barber is someone who creates by taking away, like a writer who owns only an eraser. What did I mean by that? I don't know. I mean, I thought of a writer who has like a big book and then erases all the words he or she doesn't want and is left with the story they truly want to tell. So that's an image I had. I'm thinking of this wild artistic book I saw at Dreamtime Village. You can buy it. It's real. It's published. And it's where somebody took a book and they did art on every page, frequently blacking out lots of the words and just leaving a few of the words. So there you go. There's another source for this poem, potentially. Me standing in a smelly library, smelling of old books, in an old schoolhouse in rural Wisconsin, in this place called Dreamtime Village, flipping through that book. That's a source for this poem. So, yeah, I'm talking about the barber, but the barber is someone who takes things away. He creates by taking things away. And of course, there's all kinds of stuff we could go into if we wanted to about here I am writing a poem and I am writing words on the page, but I'm also thinking about taking words away and subtracting them. Absence is already there at the start of the poem. Emptiness. Odd. Interesting. So the poet is like a writer who has only an eraser. He's like a construction company that begins with a large office building and ends up with a small wooden house. So now I'm just sort of amplifying this idea, but that's a good way to see it. If you amplify, exaggerate, then you see it more clearly. Imagine that. Imagine if you started with a huge skyscraper and your job was to take it apart until you're left with a little wooden house. It's funny, it's playful, but hopefully it's also true. And I think for me, this poem was a breakthrough for me because it showed me how playfulness can lead to wisdom, which is something similar to what Robert Frost said at some point. Playfulness leads to wisdom. It begins in playfulness, it ends in wisdom. I think that's what Frost said. And sometimes I got poems that just are playful, and then I don't finish them because they're just kind of silly. But when you're lucky, you get something which goes deeper. And I feel I was lucky with this poem. So we got this construction company. I mean, we're talking about getting your hair cut, right? But we started with a writer, and now we've got a construction company. And now we return to the situation. When you don't know where to go in a poem, sometimes it's best just to return to what you're writing about. And that's what I did here. On the wall is his license, showing that he's been to school and learned of all the varieties of loss. So here's this barber who's doing something, he's taking things away, he's destroying, but he's a licensed professional. It's kind of reassuring. He's got this thing on the wall. It's okay. He's got some training. It's going to be all right. But still, the thought comes, for this reason, a haircut can make me nervous. You ever been nervous? I mean, I'm remembering getting my hair cut when I was a kid, when I was like 6 years old, and they'd put a board in the chair because I was not tall enough for the guy to get at my hair. And I'm thinking of Gene, who was this Italian, pretty sure, barber we went to, and I'm thinking of the hair on the floor. Such a vivid image that was. Hair, which is on your head usually, and it's on the floor. It's as far from the place where it should be as it can be, right? It's supposed to be on your head up high, and now it's down low on the floor. And there's piles of it, and you can't tell which is your hair and which is the hair of other folks who've been in there, which is interesting too. Suddenly you're losing yourself, like literally losing part of your body, your hair, and you're also losing your ownership of it. Suddenly it's just hair. It's not your hair anymore. It's just on the floor. And then not only that, it's garbage. He's going to sweep it up and throw it away. Crazy. So I remember that image. For this reason, a haircut would make me nervous. Sometimes I close my eyes and hear only the snip of the scissors. They're two gleaming halves talking of the balance that is here. All right, I'm going to stop. This is a long sentence, so I'm just stop there. But I remember feeling that fear, sort of like what's going on out there. And somehow while closing my eyes, I was safe. I could just be in there. Whatever's going on out there, I don't know. There's snipping happening, but the ruse is that I'm closing my eyes because the scissors are so close. But the actual truth is I just like checking out. I'm going to be in my head. I'm not going to think about this. I don't want to watch, right? It's like getting an operation. You don't want to see it. You're okay to go through with it. I don't want to see it. So there's that urge in me to close my eyes. And then we go to the scissors, right? And again, I'm returning to the moment to find a way to finish this poem, because that's the thing. I can see myself writing this and anxiety is growing. Like, how does this thing end, right? Sometimes I close my eyes and hear only the snip of the scissors. They're two gleaming halves talking of the balance that is here. So that's an intriguing detail. The scissors are two halves. The partnership between this man in a blue smock and the hairs faithful as rain, that even before birth and after death flow tirelessly out of the head towards the comb and the blade. So we have this doubleness. Now, my mother, growing up, and actually I own them now, but they're kitchen scissors, but they come apart really easily. They're just meant to do that so you can wash them. So there's two pieces, and they're almost the same. You hold them in your hands. They're crafted almost exactly the same, but one has a hole and one has a little thing which sticks into the hole, and then they become scissors. So if I hadn't had that experience of scissors that you can take apart and really feel how they're two parts, well, this image, this moment would not have come to me, perhaps. Gleaming halves, talking of the balance that is here. We have two things, right? Partnership between this man in a blue smock and the hairs faithful as rain. So again, you can take away the subject of a poem and just look at its metaphors, at its similes. So forget this is about a barber at all, and maybe it's not about a barber at all. And we have a writer, we have a construction company, and we've got rain. That's what we have. Interesting. That even before birth and after death flow tirelessly out of the head towards the comb and the blade. So we have that hair like grass growing tirelessly out of the head towards the comb and the blade. So I'm grateful for this poem. I'm grateful that it came to me. And where does poetry come from? Factually, actually, like I say, I wrote this poem while staying at this cabin at Cabacona Lake in northern Minnesota. I had just finished a year of poetry school. I was getting an MFA in creative writing, focusing on poetry at the New School in New York City. I had been living in Minneapolis, and I moved to New York, and I went back to Minnesota for part of the summer, and I talked to Robert, and he was like, oh, you can stay at my cabin. And it was kind of funny. Well, Robert, I asked Robert about the cabin. He told me how to get there, basically, but he didn't give me lots of details, which is, it's a thing he often did. It was sort of you could say it's laziness. He didn't want to spell it out, but it's also this sense of teaching. It really was. And he did this often to me and other people. He would throw you into the water without proper preparation, and you would have to sink or swim. So this is a small example of that because it's just a cabin we're talking about, but it is a trait that Robert had throughout his life when I knew him. And so he didn't tell me much. He's like, oh, it's up here. You'll figure there's a notebook somewhere. It tells you how to turn on the power and the water. You'll find it. That was it. I talked to his wife, Ruth. She was a little more helpful. She was like, well, I think the notebook is here on this shelf in this room. You might look there. That's what I had. Off I went. And I drove a couple hours north. And I came to Cabacona Lake. I came to this cabin. Now, when I got there, it was late in the day. The sun was going down. And so I got out, went to this cabin. It was octagonal. Robert told me he added a little more to it each year whenever he had the money. And so it was built slowly over the years. So a nice, small little thing, octagonal cabin. I get in there, and the sun's going down. It's getting dark, and I'm, like, thirsty, and I want to turn the lights on. And I'm like, well, okay, where's this notebook, So I start looking around. Now, I've just stepped into this place. It's been shut for a while. There's I don't remember, but there's probably cobwebs and stuff. Dusty, for sure. And I'm going through this cabin, but what was sort of beautiful and hilarious was that it was filled with artifacts from Robert's life. It was filled with books, a lot of books and other things as well. And so I'm sort of tearing through this place looking for this notebook as it's getting darker and darker. And I would just pull things off the shelves. I pulled this manila envelope off the shelf, and I was maybe this is it. And I opened it up, and it's all of his translations of Rilke, the German poet. Which are wonderful, odd, interesting translations. And there they are. There's the original manuscript. I'm like, whoa, crazy. Put it back. I look through it. The house was filled with stuff like this. Everything I touched was like literary history. It was just crazy. I went into this little closet sort of room, I remember, and there was a laundry basket with a bunch of papers in the bottom and some other stuff on top of it and a chainsaw at the top. And so I'm like, well, maybe it's in the papers. So took out the chainsaw, and then there was a Christmas ornament It was designed, it was in the shape of the god Odin, and it's the symbol, the image, which Robert used for the 50s press, and then later the 60s press, this magazine he had, called the 50s and then called the 60s. And he put that on the front there. And there it is. There's this Christmas ornament. Well, that's great, but it doesn't tell me how to turn the lights on. Then I look at the papers, and they're all letters from Donald Hall, the American poet, Robert's great and good friend, and they had a lengthy correspondence throughout their lives, back and forth, where they would talk about all kinds of things. Robert has written that once he and Donald had a 48-hour rule, like you had to get another letter in the mail in 48 hours or else. So they would revise each other's poems. They would give each other advice. So just an amazing trove of like poetry knowledge. And there it is at the bottom of this laundry basket. But that wasn't it either. So I went through this house, and it's getting darker and darker. And finally I found it. And I was able to turn on the power and to turn on the water and all those things. And life was good. So I spent 2 weeks up there, and it was a good time. It was hot. Minnesota's super hot in the summer. Might surprise you because it's known for its deep winters, but it's also extremely hot, hotter than Ithaca, New York, where I grew up. And I was writing, and I read the books there. I remember Robert's copy of Ulysses was there, James Joyce, and then Robert's copy of the Mabinogion. Ulysses I've never gotten through, honestly, but the Mabinogion, that was the stuff. I was like, wow. And it had his notes in it. He'd written in pencil. I remember he wrote on the back at the end, he just wrote, "Oh, it is wonderful," and he with an exclamation mark. And then he was relating a particular story in that book to the 7 chakras of the body, and going on about what a wonderful story it was. So that's the first time I encountered the Mabinogion, the Welsh story cycle, which is quite wonderful, and I've gone on to tell it in many places. But that was first contact for that. So I spent 2 weeks up there, and I had some good idleness. That's what you need, You need time to play. Our brains, our minds, our bodies, we put them to work. We do stuff. We buy groceries. We think about stuff. What's going on next? What do I do? Where do I go? We're pretty busy a lot of the time. And creative work, poetry in this case, often comes from idleness, just sitting around. You can listen to the thoughts that come and just play with them and see where they go. You can remember the past. You can think about the future. You can imagine. Those are all vital things, and we need idleness to do that in. There was a rowboat there. I remember taking it out on the lake. Robert wrote a poem in that boat. I believe it's called "After Drinking All Night with a Friend, the Two of Us Go Out in a Boat at Dawn to See Who Can Write the Best Poem." That's the poem title. He was reading a lot of the Chinese poets at the time who have lengthy titles which say exactly the situation of the poem. So I was out in that boat. The poet Thomas Smith has also written a poem about that boat. Anyway, whatever. It's just a boat. But I'm just saying there was some good idleness there at that house at Cabacona Lake. And it led to this poem, which I am very grateful for. So, I guess that's my answer for where this poem came from. And like I say, it also comes from a third place, unknown to me, unknown to all of us. It comes out of the forest to us, and its tracks are there for a while, and then they're washed away by the rain, and we never see them again. And where this poem came from, we really don't know. Here it is again for you. The Barber. The barber is someone who creates by taking away, like a writer who owns only an eraser. He is like a construction company that begins with a large office building and ends up with a small wooden house. On the wall is his license, showing that he's been to school and learned of all the varieties of loss. For this reason, a haircut can make me nervous. Sometimes I close my eyes and hear only the snip of the scissors, their two gleaming halves talking of the balance that is here, the partnership between this man in a blue smock and the hairs faithful as rain, that even before birth and after death flow tirelessly out of the head towards the comb and the blade.